In the last lesson, we got to grips with the UI table view and figured out how we can populate it with message items from our message model. Now, in this lesson, we're going to improve the design of our table view a little bit by using some custom cells instead of these bog standard UI table view cells that comes preloaded. So the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to go into the views folder, and it's here that I'm going to create my new files. So right click on the views folder and create a new file. And this is going to be a Cocoa Touch class from iOS. And it's going to be a subclass of a UI table view cell like this. And it's going to be called a message cell with a capital M and a capital C. And remember to tick this box to create a design file, which is called a zip file that's going to be associated with this class of message cell. Make sure the language is Swift and then go ahead and click Next. In the next screen, make sure that it's going to be added to the views folder in here under group and that the target flash chat is checked, and then click Create. Now it's going to create two files for us, the messagecell.swift, which is this file right here, and something called a messagecell.zip. So the zip is a design file which is going to be used by our message cell. So when it says awake from nib, the nib is a old name for the zip. So essentially what's happening here is it's going to initialize whatever it is that we put into this design right here. Let's go ahead and design it. The first thing I'm going to add is a UI view onto the screen. And I'm going to resize this view so that it pretty much just fits along the left. And I'm going to change its background to one of the custom colors that are from our assets folder that you should already have preloaded. And we've called them the brand blue color, brand light blue, light purple, and purple. So I'm going to change the background here to the brand purple. And inside this UI view, I'm going to add a label. This label is going to go inside this view. Next, I'm going to head back into my object library and look for an image view to put onto the right side of the cell. And this is going to show my avatar image. Once it's in place, we're going to go ahead and drop our view and our image view into a stack view. And because they're stacked horizontally, immediately we get a horizontal stack. So now I'm going to select my image view and I want to give it some width and height constraints. So I want the width to be 40 and I want the height to be 40 as well. And then let's go ahead and hit enter to add those. The next thing to do is I'm going to select my stack view and I'm going to add constraints 10 from every single edge. And when you click the drop down, it should be relative to the content view, which is going to be the size of the cell. So once you've added all of those and turned them red, then go ahead and add those 4 constraints. The very final thing we have to do is to define some constraints for the label inside our view. And in this case, it's also going to be 10 points away from the edge of that purple view. So let's go ahead and add those 4 constraints. And now you'll see that all of our errors and warnings have disappeared, but our view is a little bit off the screen. So we can resize our cell just to make it fit the actual content. And now that we've got our constraints in place, we can leave it like this. The final thing I want to change is to select the stack view and change the spacing between the items from 8 to 20 to give a little bit more space between the image view and the label. And finally, I'm going to change that image view to have the me avatar image inside. So it's starting to look a bit like a message bubble now, right? Now, just as what we've done with our main storyboard, the view controllers in it, and these Swift files, we can also do the same thing in our messagecell.zip. We can go over here and show the assistant editor, and because our message cell here is linked to our message cell class, then this is the file that's automatically going to show up from the right. So what we want to do is to create some IB outlets so that we can actually tap into them and change their properties. So the first IB outlet I'm going to create is one from the view here. So I'm going to control drag that over here, and I'm going to call it message bubble and then hit connect. The next one is the actual label. So it's a little bit small on here, and you might end up sort of clicking on the wrong thing when you create the outlets. I think it's easier to control click on the document outline element here. So from our label, we're going to drop it down over here to a separate line, and I'm going to call this outlet just label and then hit connect. So now we've got two outlets, and the final one I'm going to add is going to come from this image view right here, the me avatar image view. So I'm going to call that right image view and then hit enter. So now we've connected up those elements to our message cell, and we're ready to go ahead and use this message cell class as the UI table view, which will display in the table view of our chat view controller. The first step of using a custom design file, a custom zip file, is to register it in the view did load. So in our chat view controller's view did load, I'm going to go ahead and register that nib with my table view. So I'm going to say TableView dot register, and in this case we're going to choose this one to register a nib for a cell reuse identifier. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and the nib in this case that we have to create is going to be a UI nib, and it's going to be initialized using the nib name. So the nib name is the name of this file. So it's the part before the .xib part. So it's capital M, capital C, message cell. But because we've already created a constants file where I've created this type property called cell nib name and set it equal to message cell, as long as your zip file is spelled exactly the same as here, message cell.zip, and if not, you can change it right here to make sure that this matches this string right here. And now we can use this cell nib name inside here. So we'll say k.cell nib name, and the bundle is going to be set as nil. And the cell reuse identifier, remember in our constants, we've got it as reusable cell. So I'm going to copy this string right here, go back into my zip, select that cell, message cell, and then go into the attributes inspector and put it right here as the reuse identifier. So hit enter, and that should be activated now. Now we can again use that constant k.cell identifier in here. So now that we've registered our table view, the next step is to go down here into our table view data source method where we're creating our cell. Now notice how previously we were just dequeuing a bog standard UI table view cell. Now in this case, in order for us to know about all of those properties in that particular class, the message cell class, we have to use the as keyword to cast this reusable cell as a message cell class. And it's only after we do that can we actually write cell.label, which is that IB outlet we created just now, .text, and set it to equal the message body from our messages array. And now we can actually go into our main.storyboard and actually delete this prototype cell or reusable cell because we're no longer using it anymore. Instead, we're using the cell that's created from the message cell.zip with our custom designs and our custom IB outlets here. Let's try this out. Let's go ahead and run our app and see if we're able to show this design in each of the cells in our table view. And you can see, there we go. We've got our message showing up and we've got our avatar showing up on the right. So it's still looking a little bit ugly, but at least it works, right? And it's able to populate the label right here with the text that we got from our messages array. Let's make this look a little bit better, shall we? Let's go ahead and change some of these things. So the first thing I want to change is the label text color. Instead of having it as the default, I want to change it to the brand light purple so that it contrasts nicely with the background. And then I want to make this background, this message bubble UI view, to have some rounded corners to make it look a bit more like a message bubble, right? So how do we do that? Well, if we go into our message cell.swift and locate the awake from nib method, this is one of the methods that's really similar to sort of the view did load in a view controller. This is going to be called when we create a new message cell from the message cell zip. So it's right here when our app is running that we're going to set the message bubbles layer property dot corner radius property, and instead of setting it to equal a constant, which means it's always going to be that particular roundedness, instead I'm going to make it a little bit more dynamic. So I'm going to tap into the message bubbles frame and size, and then I'm going to take its height, because remember, as our messages grow, if they get longer, then this message bubble is going to get taller and taller. So I want my corner radius to adapt with that height. So my corner radius is going to be equal to the height divided by 5. And now let's run our app and log in. And you can see we've now got some message bubbles. So feel free to adjust the corner radius fractions as you please. You can make it even rounder by increasing the size, or less rounded and more square by decreasing that value. But essentially, we've now got some very bubbly looking cells. The very last thing that you should be aware of is that by default, labels only get to have one line. So that means if you had lots of text in your message, I certainly know a lot of people who like sending me long messages, then notice what happens. It actually gets cut off and truncated here. So what we have to do is change the label's lines property to 0. And what that does is it allows that label to expand, and in turn makes the UI view behind it grow as well. And when it grows like this, it looks kind of weird when the avatar is kind of in the middle. So we can also select the stack view and make the alignment to the top so that this is the person who sent the message and their message will extend this way. So let's give that a run and see what that looks like. Cool, so that's it. We've got our message bubbles set up, we've got our avatar image, and we're using these custom zip files as well as custom components in order to fill up our table view. So in the next lesson, we're going to be sending some actual messages to our Firebase Cloud Firestore. So that's all to come, and I'll see you on the next lesson.